Many sites have their reputation forged by myth and marketing, and it's probably appropriate to consider the Brandenburg Gate in the light of this. Essentially what it celebrates is the overthrow of the democratic revolution in the Netherlands in 1787. The king of the time, Friedrich Wilhelm II, his cousin Wilhelmina was the wife of the Dutch stadtholder William V, and she was also a leading light basically in anti-democratic movements, so that when the revolution really broke out in 1787, she was able to ask her cousin for assistance, and Prussia invaded in the same year, 1787, and in order to put down this revolution. And that's what the Brandenburg Gate is supposed to celebrate, the overthrow of this revolution. And the outbreak of the French Revolution 2 years later on highlights the rather dubious reasons for the existence of this edifice. During the time of the Napoleonic occupation, the quadriga on the top of the gate was taken away and stored in Paris. When it returned, an iron cross and a Prussian eagle was added to the whole sculpture, and Victoria, which is basically the female at the centre of the whole thing, she was portrayed unambiguously as Victoria, the goddess of victory. So you've got a sense in a way of the Brandenburg Gate essentially war masquerading as peace. And since that time, there's been quite a few occasions that it's been used for less than democratic symbolism. So who knows? I mean, the gate is the last remaining remnant of the Zollmauer, the customs wall that was built in the 1740s. And there was one or two other remnants that existed up to the Second World War, and they were destroyed during the war, but they were never replaced. So it might be worth at least considering, if the Brandenburg Gate had been destroyed, would they have bothered rebuilding it? You know, especially because in a way it's a sort of also a sort of hindrance to traffic as well. So I mean, that could be another factor. I mean, as it was only one of two structures that still remained standing on this general area of Parisierplatz, and it was considerably damaged nevertheless. The quadriga sculpture on the top of the gate is completely new. So this is a portrayal of the Zollmauer, the customs wall, which, as I said, was constructed from 1740. You can see on the left-hand side, below the Brandenburg Gate, you've got the Potsdamer Tor, and that was one of the edifices that did manage to exist up until the time of the Second World War. You can also see that there's a bit more current than the 18th century. You've got various railway stations marked around it, but with the terminus firmly outside the wall. That's apart from the Frankfurter Bahnhof over on the right-hand side. That was the terminus for the railway coming in from Frankfurt and Oder. Also, a small point here about the spelling reform. You can see that the spelling Tor, T-H-O-R, whereas nowadays it's T-O-R. The H was dropped in a spelling reform from years and years ago. So, as I said, the wall itself was built in the 1740s, but the Brandenburg Gate, the current Brandenburg Gate, was built at the time of the French Revolution. So this is an artist's portrayal of the original Brandenburg Gate. And this is an artist's portrayal of the Potsdamer Gate, or Potsdamer Tor. And this is the Potsdamer Tor in the interwar years. I mean, the actual gate itself is technically speaking not there, but you can see the two gatehouses either side of the road. And this is looking down Leipziger Straße. The huge building there in the centre is Wertheim's department store, which is on Leipziger Straße, but also on Leipziger Platz. In the foreground, you've got this Verkehrsturm, or council, basically policeman used to be based atop of this structure, directing or manipulating the traffic lights. And if you go to Potsdamer Platz nowadays, there is a reconstruction of this structure, although it has to be said that this original structure, as shown here, was in fact abolished in 1937 and just replaced with a rather conventional traffic light system. And that is this is the same site seen from a totally different angle. And this is closer up, still looking down Leipziger Straße. So this is the wall again. As I said, the Brandenburg Gate is the only structure which is still remaining of this wall. However, in the bottom right-hand corner here, the site was actually used for the first stretch of Berlin's U-Bahn. That's the underground railway, although paradoxically this stretch was actually built as an elevated section. And by virtue of naming one or two of their stations after former gates on the wall, the names of these gates have managed to exist into the present day. This is an early view of Cottbusser Tor station. So Cottbusser Tor, or Cotti, is the name given to this area even today. And this is the Oberbaumbrücke, which takes the U-Bahn over the River Spree. The original Oberbaumbrücke was a water gate on the Zollmauer, but this bridge, despite its rather ancient appearance, was only actually built in the around about 1900, specifically to carry the railway. And there is also a road on the far side, down at a lower level. So this is a plan view of the original U-Bahn. You can see that it starts off in the east in Warschauer Brücke. Went through Stralauer Tor, which is another gate. But that station no longer exists, but that gate was on the north side of the Spree. The line then goes over the Oberbaumbrücke and almost immediately goes into Schlesisches Tor station. And you can see there's a couple of other stations, Cottbusser Tor and Hallisches Tor, various stations which managed to keep the names of the former gates on the Zollmauer alive. And this line, the elevated section of this line continues westwards from Gleisdreieck, apart from the last 2 kilometres in the west where it goes underground. Nowadays, from northwards from Gleisdreieck, the line goes through Potsdamer Platz and then goes underground under the centre of Berlin, but re-emerges on the other side as an elevated section again along Schönhauser Allee in Prenzlauer Berg. So we've got the plan of the wall again, and as I said already, there's various railway stations dotted around the outside of the wall. Notably, you've got the Potsdamer Bahnhof. Bahnhof is the German word for station. So you've got Potsdamer Bahnhof and the Anhalter Bahnhof, two very well known and important stations previously. In 1871, a circle line was built, known as the Ringbahn, and it's shown here with its very distinctive shape, rather like the head of a dog. And the Ringbahn does not actually connect all the stations, all the mainline stations directly, but it did allow trains to run from one station to the other. Now, if you look more closely at this map, you can see one or two notable features. You can see almost to the centre, you can see the Potsdamer and the Anhalter stations almost next to each other. And just below that, you've got what I presume is the Dresdner station, and that got subsumed by Gleisdreieck. Also possibly worthy of note at the moment is the another line coming in from the bottom right, and that's heading into Gorlitzer Bahnhof, which is only actually opened in 1867, but that wasn't actually shown on the previous map that I shown you. And you can see very clearly Berlin is massed to the east of the Brandenburg Gate. From the Brandenburg Gate, you've got this straight east-west axis going along to Charlottenburg. And you can make out the Tiergarten as well. You can probably also make out the Kurfürstendamm. You've got the zoological gardens marked, and I'm presuming the road just below that is the Kurfürstendamm. But the fact of life is that East Berlin was really Berlin, as described by this map here. And West Berlin, which is marked here as Charlottenburg, there were aspects of that which were quite rural, even up until fairly late. There is a book called Währungen by Theodor Fontana, which describes a lot of the action takes place on the Kurfürstendamm, and what he describes is actually quite a rural aspect. It changed very rapidly within a few years. But Theodor Fontana was an eyewitness to these events, so I think we'd take his description as being accurate. I mean, essentially, Berlin became the capital of the United Germany in 1871, and it was then that the western part of Berlin, well, the western part of present-day Berlin, really got built up. But it was only actually formally, the Berlin as we know it nowadays was only actually formed in 1920. That was when it was expanded to its present-day boundaries, and its present-day boundaries are considerably larger than what they are at the time that this map was actually taken or actually drawn. So prior to the building of the Ringbahn, the mainline stations were actually connected by a railway that ran through the streets of Berlin, known as the Verbindungsbahn. And I find it particularly interesting. This railway ran from about the 1850s to the 1871. What I find particularly interesting is that the main locomotive power during this period was provided by American locomotives. They came from the Norris Locomotives work in Philadelphia. And if I can just briefly describe the route of this Verbindungsbahn, it started in the east at the Frankfurter Bahnhof. And well, this Frankfurter Bahnhof is nowadays the Ostbahnhof. It's a bit of a problem dealing with locations in Berlin, that they tend to change the names quite frequently. But this, starting from the Frankfurter Bahnhof, present-day Ostbahnhof, the line ran south, crossed the Spree on the bridge called the Brommebrücke, and that location now is under discussion as a location for a possible pedestrian/cyclist bridge. But on the southern bank, you've got Brommestrasse, which unambiguously shows you where we're talking about. Now the line then ran almost directly south. Unfortunately, it's not shown on here. It's more or less going down to where the Koperniker Tor is indicated. Now it went down a road which nowadays is known as Eisenbahnstrasse. Eisenbahn is the word for railway, but obviously now, well, say obviously, but nowadays there's not a railway in sight. But the name Eisenbahnstrasse stems from the fact that this Verbindungsbahn used to go down that route. So when it got to the Koperniker Tor, it more or less followed the wall for quite a long way along Skalitzerstrasse, in the neighbourhood of Anhalt's, in the neighbourhood of the Anhalter Bahnhof, that is the present-day Stresemannstrasse. There is a relic of this railway, a small relic, still existing. At the Potsdamer Tor, there was a branch which went out to serve the Potsdamer Bahnhof and the Anhalter Bahnhof. And then the main line, if you can call it that, proceeded north. It went through the gate, went through the wall just short of the Brandenburg Gate, and then followed a line which would take you in front of the present-day Reichstag up to the Hamburger Bahnhof, which is presently an art gallery. From there, it went east to the Stettiner Bahnhof, just north of the Oranienburger Tor. The Stettiner Bahnhof was renamed as the Nordbahnhof after the Second World War, given that Stettin became part of Poland. And eventually that station was mostly demolished, but the underground station serving the S-Bahn still exists. So that's an indication where the Nordbahnhof was originally. So this now shows up the area south of the River Spree, and you can, well, I can see anyway, just about central, the Eisenbahnstrasse is shown. I don't know whether you can actually see it, depending on how small your diagram is on your device. That's the Verbindungsbahn went down Eisenbahnstrasse, went through this sort of small green patch below it, Lausitzplatz, and then followed the Skalitzer westwards, as I described before. Now this green space to the bottom right is Gorlitzer Park, but that was formerly Gorlitzer Bahnhof, as I said previously, opened in 1867. So for a short period, until the Verbindungsbahn was discontinued in 1871, this railway was also able to serve the Gorlitzer Bahnhof. Now, this present-day Gorlitzer Park has received a rather unsavoury reputation nowadays as a safe haven. Well, not a safe haven, but a haven for drug runners and so on. It's not a place recommended for a visit at night. But on the plus side, you can actually walk through here, and you can go directly down to Treptower Park on the River Spree and so on. So this is showing a church on Lausitzplatz. As I described it on the previous slide, the railway just went through like Lausitzplatz, unobstructed, if you like. So, but this church was constructed later in 1893, and it was typical of a movement at the time, building of large churches in Berlin as a sort of official attempt to bring the masses back to Christianity, if you like, or something along those lines. So here we have the map again, and as I just said, the Gorlitzer Bahnhof was not shown on this map, but it's around about where the Koperniker Tor is indicated. And further west, as I've already mentioned as well, you've got the Potsdamer Bahnhof and the Anhalter Bahnhof. And you can imagine that basically what we're displaying here is East Berlin, and whereas most of the stations in post-war times were in West Berlin. So you can see that why most of these stations lost their reason to be, and most of them were demolished. Just prior to the full-scale demolition of the Anhalter station, a decision was made to keep a section, and this is the section shown here. But although the Anhalter and Potsdamer were large stations, which most of them seems to have disappeared, they were also had behind them very, very large goods yards and things like that. So there could still be aspects of this remaining. I mean, in the area there is the Technik Museum, i.e. the Science and Technology Museum, and I mean, things change, but I know the last time I visited the museum, there was large areas there which were obviously railway goods yards. There's plenty of relics knocking around from the railways and so on. Right, so we're back on the map again. While I'm looking at this map, I can probably spend a couple of minutes talking about the large-scale features that you can see on this map. In the west of the area enclosed, to the west of the area enclosed by the wall, and directly adjacent to the wall, there were 3 squares laid out, and these were named after the Napoleonic Wars. These were named in honour of various events during that period. You got adjacent to the Brandenburg Gate, you've got Parisierplatz. This was formerly known as Carré or Square. Adjacent to the Potsdamer Tor, you had the Octagon, which was named after, well, it became named Leipziger Platz after the Battle of Leipzig, which was made a major turning point in the Napoleonic Wars. And I mean, seen on a map of present-day Berlin, it's quite strange that you've got Potsdamer Platz and Leipziger Platz directly next to each other. But now you know the reason, basically, because previously that's where they were divided by the wall. Leipziger Platz was a formal Platz, set up directly abutting the Potsdamer Tor. And probably Potsdamer Platz originally was probably just considered a small-scale place. But with the arrival of Potsdamer Bahnhof, one of the most important railway stations in Berlin, Potsdamer Platz gained in importance. Anyway, you can see running through this picture, you've got the River Spree shown fairly obviously, and in the centre it splits into two sections, forming an island known as the Spree Insel. And you can also see on there that this insel is given the name Köln. Now that's not a name that you see commonly nowadays. But previously Köln was located on this Spree Insel, where Berlin itself was on the right-hand side of the Spree, as you can see here. Fairly early on, I'm talking about the 13th or 14th century here, Berlin-Köln operated as a sort of a twin city. Well, it was a twin city arrangement. And royal power, when Berlin became a sort of an important city, royal power was actually centred in Köln. That's where the royal palace was. You can see outside the Spree, you can see another blue almost circle. It's a bit discontinuous on the west-hand side, but what this is, that's a former moat. There was a former fortifications around Berlin that was demolished in about the same time that the Zollmauer was constructed, i.e. about 1740. So the walls of the old fortification were torn down, but the moat remained. Down towards the bottom right, you can see the Luisenstädtische Canal. And you can probably guess from the shape of it. I mean, this canal connected the Spree to the Landwehr Canal. And you can see this from the shape of it that it's not really a real canal, if I can call it that. It was more a sort of an upmarket water feature for a new residential area. And you can still see traces of this canal. It's nowadays a green area, apart from the central, I don't know whether you'd call it a lake, but the Enkelbecken at the centre there, that is still full of water and is retained as a water feature. The Enkelbecken and the stretch to the northeast of it was on the wall from 1961 onwards. So essentially that section was a part of the death strip, and the Enkelbecken was filled in and everything. But since reunification, it's been restored, and the Enkelbecken is now full of water again, and it's marked out from afar by the large St. Michael Kirke, which is on its north bank. And I can probably just add that to the northwest, inside the wall, you can also see the river Pankow, and that further north, that runs through the district of Pankow. In more latter times, in this section shown here, where it's just about to meet the River Spree, it became more notorious as an underground sewer. So it's implicit in what I've shown so far that the Brandenburg Gate, when it was originally constructed, was the western limit of Berlin. And as I said, Berlin itself, as we know it today, was formed in 1920. So up until 1920, although the Brandenburg Gate did not remain as the western limit of Berlin right up to the 1920s, the western boundary did not actually move all that much. And that's shown on this diagram here, where the western limit of Berlin prior to 1920 is shown by the Charlottenburger Tor, which was a gate put up by Charlottenburg as a sort of a counterpoise to the Brandenburg Gate. And the distance between the two is only about 4 kilometers, something like that. You can see the east-west axis here running right through the Tiergarten. And this is the Charlottenburger Tor, still in existence. Although there was a major scheme during the Nazi period to build a really wide east-west axis, and about 7 kilometres of this was actually put into completion, including this section. So that involved separating these two parts of the Charlottenburger Tor further apart. But this is looking westwards towards present-day Ernst Reuter Platz. So this is just a final look at the wall again. One feature I find quite unusual about this is, as I said before, the wall was demolished in 1860, or 1867 I should say, I think. But as it's shown down here, there is an Anhaltisches Tor. And this was a special gate built specifically for the Anhalter Bahnhof. And I mean, this was built in 1840, and furthermore, it was actually designed by Schinkel, who is a well-known name in Berlin. Many structures in Berlin were designed by him. So it seems quite unusual that in 1840, rather than just build a large hole in the wall for the benefits of passengers on the railway, they went to the extent of actually building a new gate, not just a new gate, but one actually designed by Schinkel himself. And this was only less than 30 years before they decided to demolish the entire wall completely. Anyway, thanks if you're still with me after all these, what is it now, 26 minutes. Thanks if you're still with me. I can just end briefly by mentioning my book on this city. It's called Berlin, an A to Z compilation. Well, thanks for staying with me, and cheers for now.